Hey everyone, welcome back to the garden. Today I want to talk to you guys about amazingly adaptable plants. I think I can speak for most of the United States and even my viewers in other countries that over the last few years we've had some crazy weather. Whether it's floods, drought, brutal winds, lots of snow, ice. But I've noticed in my own garden that there are some plants that seem to meet these challenges head on. So I want to talk to you about those plants today. So come garden with me and let's talk about workhorses in the garden. So I've chosen a couple of evergreens and then I've chosen 3 deciduous plants. Obviously, I'm not going to be able to show you the deciduous plants and what they look like at this time of the year, but I'll use some clips from previous videos in the spring and summer and talk to you about those. But a couple of them are out front here. One of them is the Thuja Thin Man, and one of them is a broadleaf evergreen, Ilex glabra shamrock. So let's go look at those, and I'll tell you why I think these plants, at least in my garden, have been workhorses. Over the years, we've experienced so many different weather conditions in my garden. When we first started gardening here in 2015, over the winter it was extremely wet. Then we went into kind of a drought. 2016 to 2023 really were all extremely wet years. And then dry in the summers, some summers. So I had to adapt to that and kind of really research which plants were going to be able to handle those conditions. And then starting in the summer of 2023 and again 2024 and now going into 2025, we've been in extreme drought. So I've also had to research what plants can handle really dry conditions. So I'm going to talk to you about plants that I've noticed have been able to handle some of those conditions, and not just those, but extreme winds as well. And I think these are probably plants that a lot of us can use in our gardens. So right here we're looking at the Thuja Thin Man. This is an arborvitae. These were planted in the fall of 2023. And we've had, again, some extreme winds this season. They have not bronzed at all. They look really pretty too with the snow on them. When we planted them in the fall of 2023, going into that winter, as I said, we experienced really, really heavy rains, flooding rains in some cases, and these did extremely well right next to our dry creek bed. I know you can't see it right now because it's under snow. These are planted on the west side of our property, and behind me is kind of northwest. So that's where the prevailing winds come from in the winter. And as you can see, they have not browned. They have not even bronzed. So they stay a deep, nice evergreen all winter long. Unlike some arborvitae that can, and even some cryptomeria that can really, really bronze in the winter. So if you're looking for an evergreen, and you don't have a lot of space too, because these are space saving, they can handle those conditions, try checking out the Thuja Thin Man. So just a few more details about the Thuja Thin Man. It is a native evergreen, native to North America. It is, again, 12 to 15 feet tall. On the website at the Spring Meadow Nursery, it says 2 to 3 feet wide. I kind of thought that it was more of a 3 to 5 foot wide, but either way, kind of narrow. Again, if you need a narrow, fast-growing privacy screen, it's great for that. And again, I have not had to do anything to keep it from browning, either last winter or this winter. It has been in the ground for 2 winters now, so it's gone through 2 winters without any bronzing. A tip though, if you have newly planted evergreens, make sure going into autumn and winter that you are providing additional moisture for them. So that way you can avoid winter bronze on plants like cryptomeria that are prone to bronzing anyway. That might just help them stay a little bit greener. But as I said, I have not had any issues with the Thuja Thin Man bronzing over the winter, and it is planted in an area where it is not protected from the wind at all. I have not had to wrap them. I haven't had to do anything to them, so they've been really brilliant in that respect, and they have even proved to be deer resistant. Now we do spray on a regular basis, but every once in a while, if we don't get out there exactly every 3 to 4 weeks, other plants will get nipped. The Thuja Thin Man have never been nipped either. Now I would not take that as you don't have to do anything to protect these from deer, because most arborvitae, especially eastern arborvitae, which this is, are very, very prone to deer damage. And we have extreme deer pressure in my area, and we have had some arborvitae, like Fire Chief arborvitae, completely destroyed by deer. But for some reason, they do not like the Thuja Thin Man. I'm grateful for that. They might be different in your yard, but that's just something else that I wanted to note about this plant. So here's what the Thuja Thin Man look in our garden in kind of mid-summer. Very green, pretty, and then I'll show you in a minute what they look like even a little bit later in the year. This is kind of like late summer, early fall. And again, they're just a pretty evergreen that stays green all year long, can handle all kinds of conditions. It was very, very hot and dry this summer in a lot of the country, and in our area as well. And you can see how well they did. We really didn't provide them with any additional moisture. So another great plant as a garden workhorse in all kinds of conditions. So this is a broadleaf evergreen, and we've used these in several locations in our garden. This one is Ilex glabra shamrock. They just kind of maintain a 4 to 5 foot tall and wide range. They can sucker. If that's a problem with you, you can easily cut them out. But I wanted an evergreen that could tolerate some wet conditions, because in times of extreme rains, our rain garden here can overflow. They also look pretty in the winter, so they do provide that winter interest. But I have noticed with this plant that we have planted in our upper rain garden that can get extremely dry, and it did this summer, and we did not provide any extra water. They performed really well. So let's go up there and take a look at those. So while most websites do list the Ilex glabra as a plant that needs consistent moisture, like I said, those in our upper rain garden here have not gotten that, and they've done absolutely fine. So here we are descending into our top rain garden, and there you can see we have two Ilex glabra shamrock, same plant we have out front, and they're doing quite well with the drought we had this summer. Obviously, in prior years, when we had lots and lots of rain, this rain garden could get quite damp at the bottom, and they still did well because they are an evergreen that can handle lots of moisture. I'll also show you what these look like in the spring and summer too. I also have several Ilex glabra strongbox, and you can see one of them right here. And the great thing about these two, not only do they withstand really, really wet conditions, especially in the winter, which is when you have to really worry about evergreens, they are a little tolerant of shade as well. So this one down here gets a little bit more shade, and it's still a really pretty evergreen to provide winter interest. Maybe not as big as the one that gets a little bit more sun, but perfectly acceptable. So here what the Ilex glabra shamrock looked like right as we were planting them in our front rain garden. So these were the ones that I showed you down towards the bottom of our property. You can just see how pretty and dark evergreen they are, dense all the way to the ground. Some varieties are more dense growing than others. So again, another evergreen that can tolerate hot and dry conditions. Can take wind. Again, these are at the bottom of our property, planted right where the Thuja Thin Man are. So the prevailing winds will be coming from this direction all winter long, and they have stayed evergreen. We did plant these just this summer, so we did provide some additional moisture because we were in the middle of a drought. But like I said, the ones at the top of the property, we have not really provided any additional moisture, and they are doing just fine. So again, a nice evergreen, drought tolerant once established. Now, if we do go through, if our drought continues, I have no doubt we're going to have to provide some additional moisture for these ones in particular, since they are newly planted.
So that's just something to keep in mind.
So the next three plants I'm going to talk about are the deciduous plants that I mentioned when we were outside. They are Itea, Buttonbush, and Viburnum dentatum. I'm going to talk about the Itea first, then the Buttonbush, and then the Viburnum. Obviously, at this time of the year, they don't have any foliage, so right now they're pretty much just sticks. So we'll talk about those using clips from previous videos. So let's get into it.
So here are the Virginia Sweetspire. These are the first ones we planted. These are the Little Henry, and this is our early June garden tour. And you can see they're in full flower here. They are very, very fragrant. Now, this is a shrub that is small. It's not going to be a big shrub like the viburnum that we're going to talk about or like the buttonbush, but they are very, very adaptable in that they can tolerate sun and shade. They can tolerate drought and times of really, really wet conditions. Let's take a look real quick at the Missouri Botanical Garden website. Now here they have rain garden usage. They can tolerate heavy shade. They're great for erosion. They do well in clay and wet soil. They also tolerate a wide range of soil conditions, though. They can sucker. Now, I have not had any sucker really, really badly in my garden. We have some Henry's garnet planted at the very, very bottom of our property. You can see how big these ones are. They're really pretty. That seem to sucker more than the little Henry, but nothing extreme. We don't have to do too much pruning down there. Just every once in a while go in and prune down the sucker. Get a closer look in on the little Henrys. You can see what pretty foliage they have too. So the new growth is kind of like a very light green and the older growth is a darker green. They're very fragrant. Their flowers are like a long white raceme, similar to a summer sweet. These ones get a little bit more shade here because they are shaded out a lot of the time by those two silver maples I had previously spoken about in several videos. In the height of summer. In spring, they get more sun, but they do just fine right here with that shade. So if you have an area of your garden that is in full shade, you can definitely use Itea and get something that is going to flower. And if it's like a wet shade condition, these will do great there. Let's play this through, just get some more looks at the little Henry, and then we're going to move on to the latest one we planted, which is called the Visions of Rouge, which is a really, really pretty one. So here's the Visions of Rouge. Now, this is a newly planted one on our property, so we have not had this for very long. The reason I chose it is because, I'm going to pause this video, you just see the gorgeous color. So even the Henry's Garnet does not get this red in the fall. This is a really, really pretty color for this plant. I also have a picture of it here because again, we don't want plants that only do one thing. So these tolerate really, really wet conditions, sun, shade, have beautiful fragrant flowers, and look at that fall color. Absolutely gorgeous. I think you can see why that's called Visions of Rouge.
So just a couple more notes about the Itea. So like I said, we have not had the Visions of Rouge planted very long. The reason why I chose that up there in that location is because last winter in particular, with all of the heavy rain we had from December 2023 right through May 24, there was a lot of standing water up there and we did lose a couple of shrubs. So because that can handle really, really wet conditions and a little bit of shade, which it can get in the summer, I chose that for up there, but we have Henry's Garnet. I'm not sure it's a Henry's Garnet or an Scentlandia planted at the bottom, the very, very bottom of our property where we have our dry creek bed extended. Those are in full sun all day, every day during the summer, in spring, summer, and into the fall. They never get any shade. They never get an additional moisture, even though they are kind of adjacent to the extension of our dry creek bed down to the bottom of our property. That dry creek bed doesn't really flow like our top creek bed does. So they don't get any additional moisture. They're almost always in a drier situation down there and they do absolutely fine. And they do get pretty red foliage, not like this new one, the Visions of Rouge. But again, it does really, really well down there in a dry situation. The Little Henry, where they're located, can be either wet or dry. So they've done well in both. And again, it is a little bit shadier there.
So another great workhorse in the garden for all of those challenging conditions that you might have, extreme weather or not. The second deciduous shrub that I chose to talk about today is the buttonbush. And this is not a plant I would grow in full shade, but it can tolerate a little bit of shade. Again, the reason why I chose it is because it's great for wet soil. But it's also good for pollinators. It attracts hummingbirds and butterflies. Obviously, you can use it in a rain garden, which I do. I have two or three in our bottom rain garden, which I'll show you in a second. Those are the Sugar Shack, and the two larger ones called Magical Moonlight up on the berm of our top rain garden in an area that can be particularly wet for months with standing water. But you can see right here, it can grow in flood conditions and shallow standing water, but it does adapt to a wide range of soils except really, really dry ones. Although, again, in times of drought like this summer, our bottom rain garden really did not get a lot of moisture, and the Sugar Shack button bushes, they're just fine. What else? So it can be a large, rangy shrub. If you do the straight native, the Magical Moonlight and the Sugar Shack stay nice and tidy. So let's go take a look at those now. So here you can see the foliage of the Sugar Shack buttonbush. It's very glossy and dark green, and it has a lot of, it almost looks like a leather leaf to me. It has a lot of, I don't think they're veining. I'm not exactly sure what the grooves in leaves are called, but it does really well here on our bottom rain garden. You can see it's getting to bloom here in our early June garden tour. And as I said, this plant did absolutely fine this summer in our drought, which started, I should say last summer. Our drought started in June, and we're kind of still in a drought. So this bottom rain garden did not see really any precipitation last summer, enough that you would think a button bush would need, and these have done absolutely fine. And again, you can just see how glossy the foliage is. I love the look of that. Just getting you close-up shots. Just really, really pretty. Now let's go take a look at the Magical Moonlight because you're going to see that the foliage is a little bit different. You can see here the Magical Moonlight foliage. It's a little bit thinner. It doesn't have those deep, deep veins. Flowers here the same. All the button bushes have those white, almost like starship looking foliage. This is a bigger variety. I don't know if I mentioned that the Sugar Shack is 3 to 5 foot tall and wide, and the Magical Moonlight here is more of a 5 to 8 feet tall, 4 to 6 feet wide. So it is quite a bit bigger, but it's not messy. It stays very neat and tidy, much tidier than the straight native. Let's get one more look at it. And you can see the two of them here side by side. So they do really, really well up here. Again, in drier conditions like it was this summer, these were fine. We did not need to provide any additional moisture. Up here in times of really, really wet, especially winters, there can be standing water up here for months. And that's why I chose these plants. And you can see here in late August, it is a little bit shadier and they have done absolutely fine. So again, buttonbush is great for wet areas in your garden, but can also tolerate times of drought. I would not consider this a drought tolerant plant, but we have been in a drought for about 8 months now, and it has done fine with just a little bit of moisture. We got maybe a couple of inches, so I did not have to provide them with additional moisture. I would say if you're going to be in a years-long drought, this would not be a plant that I would pick, but it's been a workhorse in my garden in areas that have challenging conditions. And last but not least is the Viburnum dentatum, which you can see here at the top of our property. This is also known as Arrowwood Viburnum. These can be a rather tall shrub and wide. So if you don't have the room for them, maybe choose a smaller cultivar like blueberry, I think they're called blueberry muffin. This can get 6 to 10 feet tall and wide. It does have pretty white flowers in the spring. They are non-fragrant. And the reason why I have this up here is, again, because it has done really, really well in drought and flooding conditions that we had in the 2023-2024 winter. and they all came out just fine. You can see the pretty foliage. Again, it has that deep veining. It's dark green foliage. The best thing about these is they're growing near a black walnut tree up here, and they are very, very tolerant of that. So they provide a nice screen too if you don't want an evergreen screen. But again, they're great for sun to part shade, standing water in the winter. Up here, it was very, very wet. We lost another viburnum up here, a prog viburnum, that could not handle the conditions. These did just fine. They do fine in heavier soils, clay soil, which is what we have on our property. You can see a little insect damage here, but nothing life changing, not a problem. Let's go take a look at the fall foliage because that's another interesting feature. Back to our Itea, the rouge, but you can see back here the pretty foliage of the viburnum dentatum in the fall. So just another reason to plant them. Again, 6 to 10 feet tall. They're very, very hardy, zones 2 through 8. They do attract birds and butterflies, and again, they are great if you have black walnuts on your property, and great. They can definitely take times of extreme wet conditions. They can also tolerate those drier soils if you go through a drought.
So things are coming along today, guys, on this discussion of workhorses in the garden. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned something interesting. Maybe you can use some of these plants for your most challenging conditions. Thanks for watching, and hopefully we'll see you in the next one. Stay safe, stay warm. Bye.